Hi, and welcome to Alive with Chronic Illness, a podcast dedicated to exploring what it's like to live with and not in spite of chronic illness. Before we get started today, I just wanted to let you know that this episode contains discussions of loss, grief, and death. Today I'm joined by Jan. Jan's sister Denise died in 2023 from sepsis. She's here today to share her story. Thank you for joining me, Jan. Would you like to start by introducing yourself and telling us about Denise?
Hi, my name's Jan. I'm here today to talk about my big sister Denise, who passed away in January 2023, very, very unexpectedly from sepsis. It was a massive shock for myself and also my mum and dad, who are still with me. It was complete devastation for us. We had no prior warning. It was actually mum that found her dead in bed. And to this day, it will just haunt me, the nature of how I lost my lovely big sister. It's almost 18 months on now, and I still struggle to come to terms with it. I think because of the nature of it being sepsis, I feel it was also unavoidable had we known. And that to me is the saddest part of it, that it could have been avoided. She was 59, so still very young. She wasn't married and she didn't have any children. So myself and my parents are closest family members. It's just awful.
Yeah, and when it happens so quickly, it's just a massive shock. And
It
particularly,
is,
like you said, if you worry that it could have been preventable, that adds an extra element to it. And do you want to talk about the circumstances that led up to her death?
Well, my sister had a stoma approximately 10 years prior to her death. She'd had a bowel removed. Again, it was misdiagnosis at the hospital that led for her to have a bowel removed. That was a massive shock to her as well as us, but she lived without a bowel for 10 years, constant problems, back and to the hospital, infections. She was easily picking up infections from the stoma itself. It wasn't a very pleasant experience for her at all, and she struggled with it for 10 years. Around Christmas time, 22, 23, she'd been poorly, not in a terrible way. She thought she had a bit of flu perhaps coming on, and she was poorly over Christmas, but was managing okay. We saw the new year, and January came. She was still feeling a little bit fluey. That's all I can say to you. And it was a Sunday afternoon. It was the 8th of January. Me and her had been at mum and dad's house, and she left early saying that she still felt shivery and cold and just wanted to get in bed. We didn't really think any more of it than it was just a cold, a heavy cold. And she left mum's house about 2 o'clock on the Sunday afternoon to go home to get in bed. I phoned on the Sunday evening just to see how she was and if she needed anything, but she didn't answer her phone. So I thought, well, I won't disturb her anymore. She's obviously gone to bed, and I'll see how she is in the morning. On the Monday morning, I phoned again to see how she was feeling. No answer. I phoned my mum to see if she'd heard from her, and she said no. We both started to get a little bit worried, and mum lives closest to her, only a few minutes away. So mum said, oh, I'll pop round to her house. And there was no answer at the door. Mum had a spare key, let herself in, and that's when mum found her dead in bed. So from thinking she just had a heavy cold on the Sunday afternoon, she died that night. We don't know when, in a sleep in bed by herself. We'll never know if she was in distress or not. Obviously, the shock to my mum, who's 81. I can't describe the distress at having to find your daughter dead, but we dealt with it best we could as a family. A post-mortem had to take place because it wasn't obvious what she'd died from, and the result of the post-mortem was that she died from sepsis, which was devastating to us as a family, that how quickly it had got a hold of her. And all this time over January, the new year, it looked like she just had a heavy cold. And we feel, had we encouraged her to go to a doctor, they might have picked up on the fact that she did have sepsis. And we'll never forgive ourselves for not taking more notice, and just going along with the fact that we thought she had a heavy cold.
I think that's the difficulty, isn't it? When someone dies so suddenly, you do start to think about all the what ifs, and you get that feeling of guilt, like, did I do enough? And I still feel like that way about my sister's death. And I think you did the best you could do at the time with the information that you had.
We'll never know. She didn't appear to be in pain. She just had the symptoms, like flu symptoms. She was achy and shivery, and she did have all the classic runny nose, headaches. But she never once said it was any kind of pain. Looking back, we could have done more, but we didn't. We never understood enough about sepsis to have even, joined the dots to think it could be that. It just seems like it's a silent killer. We'll never actually know now if we could have prevented it by acting faster.
Yeah, I guess what's so difficult about sepsis is there's not a lot of information around it. And I was going to ask you, how much did you know about sepsis before she died?
Nothing. I'd heard the term used. In my mind, sepsis was some sort of blood poisoning, and it kind of ravishes your whole body. I believe it was very painful. So if you had sepsis, you would certainly know about it. That was probably about as much as I knew about sepsis. So I didn't have any indicators at all, which led me to think my sister had sepsis in her system.
Yeah, and like you said there, it seems like something that if you had it, you would know you've got it. And I think I hadn't really heard of sepsis before Lorna died either. I had, like you said, people had said sepsis and blood poisoning. That I had heard blood poisoning mentioned. And I think
Yeah.
that sticks in your mind as something that would be very unpleasant.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I think that the time scale, as well as how quickly, your whole body can shut down within a matter of hours. And I never understood that until now. I've lost Denise, and I wish I had more information and more knowledge on sepsis. It is preventable if it's diagnosed quickly enough, but you have to know the signs.
Yeah. And that can be like the really tricky thing when there's a lack of like information or awareness about it.
Totally, yeah. Since now I've looked up, there is information out there. There's warning signs that you would know to look for. I just don't think it's publicised enough. And I really truly believe that if people are more aware of the dangers of sepsis, that lives could be saved just by spotting the signs quickly enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I think often infections, things like that do lead to sepsis as well. So being aware that if you've got, maybe an infection, what the signs are, perhaps you would go to the doctors sooner rather than just sort of brushing the symptoms off.
Exactly, yeah. Denise, the coroner told us the sepsis, the infection would have come from the stoma. Obviously, it's open, and although she learned how to dress it and change stoma bags, that seems the likeliest point where the infections got in. But there was no visible signs. I imagine infection, to be able to see it, but it's not like that with sepsis at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And in my sister's case, it was picked up quite quickly because it occurred during surgery. She had ulcerative colitis and she had to have emergency surgery. and her bowel perforated during the surgery, which then led to septic shock. So, in a sense, they were able to pick it up really quickly, but there wasn't much they could do at that point.
No, it must have been very rapid for your sister Lorna. I know a lot of cases, people have survived sepsis with antibiotics just being pumped into your body. I actually think it's people don't realise just how dangerous sepsis is. I
Yeah.
would urge anybody with any kind of infection that's lasting or the feeling unwell through it, go to A&E, get yourself checked. It can be treated if it's picked up in time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important to always like, seek out that medical help if you think you need it and if you're not sure about your symptoms.
Exactly. We know the NHS is overwhelmed at the moment, and we know how hard it is to get a GP appointment. But if you any doubt in your mind at all, I just would urge people, please go and mither your doctor, go and insist that you're checked, because it's a killer. Sepsis is a killer, and it devastates families. And a lot of the time, it can be treated if we know about it.
Yeah, definitely. Steps can be taken to try and save lives and prevent sepsis as well.
Exactly. Yeah, I've kind of become obsessed now. The slightest little cut on my finger, even a paper cut, I'm obsessed now with. Oh gosh, I could get it now. I've got a small cut, and I'm almost paranoid about infections because I do know. I think it's more people have sepsis than we like to think, and it's also unavoidable.
Yeah, and I think, after Lorna died as well, I definitely felt very aware of death. Having
Yeah.
lost someone so unexpectedly and so suddenly, did you feel the same?
Yes, I do. I feel exactly the same. For the first 6 months, I had terrible anxiety because I just felt everybody around me was going to die and I'd be left alone. And I could not get that out of my head. I was phoning mum and dad daily, my son and his wife, my partner. Constantly, I'm worrying that they're just going to die. And I do think that was a shock of losing my sister so suddenly. I kept thinking, everybody's going to die around me. I'm going to be left alone. And it took me 6 months. I did have some counselling. The anxiety from losing my sister was tremendous.
Did the counselling help?
It helped me to get things into perspective. I still have moments now. It can be driving or watching TV, and all of a sudden it just overwhelms me. The same anxiety, the feelings that my loved ones are going to die. It's lesser than it was. It was all consuming initially. I'm learning just to live with it now. I don't have fear of death for myself, but I have fear for my loved ones. And that's kind of stayed with me now.
Yeah, and I think like what you touched on there when you said you're learning to live with it, I feel very much like for me, it's been a journey of learning to live with grief. It
Yeah.
hasn't really improved and not at all, to be honest. It has been over 3 years, but it still feels exactly the same as it did when she
Yeah.
died. So I do think it is like you learn to live with that pain.
Yes, you do. You have to, don't you? Life goes on and it'll never be the same. I don't think I'll ever accept it. I don't want to be an only sibling. I don't like it. But the cold, hard truth of it is, that's what I've got to get on with now. I don't know if you feel the same as me, but I feel very bitter about everybody around me, friends, and that have still got siblings. And I feel very envious and bitter. And when I hear friends saying, "Oh, I'm just popping round to see my sister," it hurts so deep that I can't do that anymore.
Yeah, and it is difficult. It's really difficult, and a lot of like you sort of touched on how life like goes on, and sometimes I sort of think, well, I don't know how the world's still spinning. My life stopped in
Yeah.
2021 with my sisters, and Yeah, I can definitely empathize with how you feel there. It's almost still feels unreal now, even though of course I know she's dead. It's just that like how is that possible? How could
Yeah,
somebody so alive die? Like how could
yeah,
that even be possible?
yeah,
No, those thoughts defy reality. It's that feeling of just still shock, even now.
yeah. And I don't think that will ever leave you. I don't think you'll ever leave me. I've just had to sell my sister's house. As I say, she was single and she had no children. My parents are elderly, so it kind of fell to me to clear a house, all the belongings, and then put a house on the market. And when I closed the front door for the last time, when it had been sold, I sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. I will never walk into my sister's house ever again. And the reality of that, I can't actually put it into words. I'll never just pop round to my sister's. It was final. It was cold, and it broke my heart. It broke my heart. I'll never be able to pass that house again because I know somebody else is living in my sister's house, and it feels so wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, going past somewhere you must have had so many happy memories.
Yeah, yeah. I'd pop round and I'd just say, "It's only me, Denise." And I thought I'll never ever be able to do that ever again. And I think that hit me like a ton of bricks. Losing her hit me hard, but it was like another hurdle that I had to face. Yeah, it's hard. It's very, very hard. I look at pictures now of when we were children and teenagers. Oh, and don't get me wrong, we fought and argued like cat and dog at times, but we loved each other, and she's not there anymore. She's not there.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, like with the finality of selling the house, and that's just an extra thing, that extra hurdle. I often feel like I lost Lorna the day that she died, but I lost her in every single day after, every month after, every milestone, every holiday that she wasn't
Yeah,
a part of.
yeah, yeah. It's tough, isn't it? I also feel I don't know if you still have your parents. It's very, very hard because I know my mum is suffering so much. She's lost a daughter. I can't imagine her pain. I try to, and I'm there for her constantly. And I feel guilty. I think my mum's pain must be so much worse than mine. And I try to shield mum from a lot of things, and I can't always express my grief and my sadness. And that's a struggle in itself. It really is. I want to talk about my sister and I want to talk to mum, but she breaks down sobbing, and then I feel guilty. And it's a horrible situation. You must find this yourself with your parents.
Yeah, it is very difficult, and I can talk to my parents about Lorna now, and I could like in the beginning, but it's really difficult. It's painful for me to talk about. Of course, it was painful for them to talk about, and I think, like you said there, you do feel like you want to protect your parents, but it's not something we can. It's so powerless, isn't it? The feeling of that you can't do anything, you can't protect them from this.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah. I know my grief is deep, but I always think my mum's and my dad's grief must be deeper. I can't imagine, I've got a son, I can't imagine losing a son. It's not a competition of who's feeling the worst. And I feel wretched, but I think, what must my mum feel? She's lost a baby. And it's very, very, it's so hard. My family will never ever be the same again. And we're learning slowly to pick up pieces. I can't really put it into words. It's just a black cloud above you all the time. And when you do feel times of joy, and then I feel guilty because I think I shouldn't be happy because my sister's not here. Why am I why am I laughing and joking and smiling at something? And then I feel guilty all over again.
For me, when we found out that she was critically unwell, I remember thinking this is before we knew that she was definitely going to die. It was I don't know if we can survive this if she dies. Then it's almost I feel guilty that we did that we're still
Yeah.
here like 3 years later and still doing okay. We're functioning okay. We're not brilliant. I don't think we ever will be again because a whole part of us is missing and that can never be fixed.
No, no, no. I fully get I fully get that. The only way I can kind of keep her memory alive. Obviously, we've got photographs of her everywhere, and we visit her resting place and take flowers for her. I have a granddaughter. She's only 4. She doesn't really remember Denise. But we keep a memory alive. We're always talking about her. We'll say, Auntie Niece is watching us, and Auntie Niece is. And I just want to keep her memory alive, not just with myself and people that knew her, but I don't want her ever to be dead, if you like. So by telling my granddaughter about her constantly, I feel as if it's keeping her memory alive.
Yeah, keeping that connection.
Yeah, yeah. My granddaughter says she remembers her, but she would have only have been 2, and I doubt very much whether she will. But I'm constantly showing her photographs and telling her little tales about Denise. I just want a memory I want some legacy to be there. It's just a constant struggle.
Yeah, I'm sure like even if she doesn't remember her, but she'll know her through you and through
Yeah,
the stories that you've shared with her.
yeah, and that's what I'd like. Did your sister have children or?
No, my sister was 19 when she died, so
Okay,
still
okay.
living at home and with my parents.
That's terribly young, isn't it? Heartbreaking.
Yeah,
I feel for you. I feel for you all.
thank you. It is, you said, we can't really put it into words truly what grief feels like and that experience.
No, no. If you was to ask me what's one thing that I could do in Denise's memory, it would contribute in some way to raising awareness of sepsis in order to save a life, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, maybe somebody will listen and they'll see some resources around sepsis and maybe they'll go to the doctor when they wouldn't have. And maybe, if we share our experiences, we can kind of help save somebody else's, even though there's nothing we can now do for our siblings.
I hope so. I really hope so. I think it would feel as if Denise's death wasn't in vain. If I thought her experience, the loss, could save somebody else, then it's like a shining star. There's something good come from such a loss.
Yeah, absolutely. It is difficult, isn't it? Because it doesn't feel like anything good could ever come from death and from what
No.
we've lost. But there
Yeah.
is something kind of, I don't know if it's like an empowerment in being able to use this experience, maybe to save someone else's life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I really hope, I truly hope that word spreads about sepsis and awareness of sepsis, and it would save one family from going through the pain that you and I have had to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on today and for sharing your experience. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.